Good morning. It is May 14th, 2024. I'm Emmeline Jones, the Chair of the Oconee County Conservation Bank Board. This is our regular scheduled meeting, and we do have a quorum, and so I'd like to call the meeting to order. The first item on our agenda is the approval of minutes, which everyone should have received. Is there a motion that we...
I move that we approve those special meeting minutes from April 16th.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The treasurer's report, Jennifer, have we gotten the, okay, perfect.
Yes, it came in.
Thank you.
So the treasurer's report for the local government investment pool for the period ending April 30th, 2024, we had an opening balance of $381,385.18. Reinvestments totaled $1,731.51. The ending balance is $383,116.69. And then for the Community First Bank account, we had an opening balance of $480. No reimbursements or reinvestments. The balance ending was $480.
Okay, so let's keep that figure in mind when we get to our discussion item of the application for funding.
I move we approve the treasurer's report.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that is passed. Now we're going to move to our fundraising and public relation reports, and I've asked Andy to give an update on a local farm breakfast that we attended in March.
Okay, so I'm a member of I own the board of a nonprofit called the Oconee Food Council that looks at really comprehensively at things related to food in Oconee County, going from access to food, serving the needy, distribution, production, sustainable agriculture, that sort of thing, and conservation. And so the Food Council had a meeting on March 28th focused on conservation easements. And that's one of the things the council does, is have what they call farmers' breakfast, where farmers are invited to come to learn about a particular topic. We've done one on grants, we've done one on getting funding to help them do stuff and buy equipment, that sort of thing, and one on doing conservation type work on their property. And this one was focused on conservation easements. We had Richard Carr, the executive director of the South Carolina Farm Bureau Land Trust, as the main speaker. That's a new land trust that is focused on ag across South Carolina. He gave a great presentation. We also had Buzz Williams from the Chattooga Conservancy, which focuses on conservation in the Chattooga River watershed. And they are also a land trust, and they really focus on smaller tracts, holding conservation easements on that. It was well attended, and a lot of good discussion. We also had on the panel several farmers, a couple of them that had conservation easements on their property, and a couple that were considering having that. So it opened up a really great discussion between the folks, and I actually represented the Conservation Bank, talking about our role in conservation in Oconee County. So it was a really good meeting.
So going along with that, I thought it might be good. Every meeting I want to have what I'm going to call a minute for conservation, where we focus on one area of things that are going on in South Carolina. It may not be in Oconee County, but something that impacts us. And I want to talk for just a minute about the Working Agriculture Land Preservation Act, which was recently passed. And this act is going to provide funding through the South Carolina Conservation Bank Board devoted to helping landowners preserve working lands through voluntary conservation easements. Property owners and land trusts already work with the South Carolina Conservation Bank bill, but this bill gives funding particularly for working agriculture lands. So they're not going to have to compete with other types of green space and heritage sites. So it's really exciting. I think that along with the work that Richard's doing with the Farm Bureau is going to add another level for Oconee County in the agricultural land area.
Yeah, and if I could, just following up a little bit more and a bit connected to that and with the farmer's breakfast. One of the reasons that we decided to have it now and we had it at the Fair Oaks Community Center is because with the Sewer South project, there's a lot of concern for agriculture in the county that part of the county will shift from agriculture to more industrial, commercial, and residential development. And that's where there was a lot of interest in it was, well, what can you do to keep ag active now and in the future in Oconee County? And, so that's why it was a really good focus to do that as well. And this, that recent bill is also a good indication. I mean, it's actually reality that the state is interested in preserving agricultural land and having agricultural land. And that's one of the things Richard reported on was, I think he said that 17% of our country is available for agriculture. That's our, total amount, and that it's being lost at a very rapid rate. And so it was very timely, I think, for that, and very timely for this bill to help work.
Is that a nationwide thing, or is that a?
That's a nationwide thing.
Really?
Yes.
So the numbers in South Carolina, I don't know that I've got them, but it's pretty alarming at the rate. The American Farmland Trust reports that between 2001 and 2016, nearly 280,000 acres of agriculture land were developed in South Carolina. 51 billion economic impact from the farmers. It's timely. And the other exciting thing is that this bill had support across the board from both sides of the political parties. So it's an issue that everybody really is starting to get behind. It's a good time to be in conservation.
Well, and I want to add to that to make you kind of aware, it's not just as open and shut that you put $4 million out and, okay, we're just going to jump and protect 200,000 acres. The reality is land right now is going probably 3 to 4 times per acre what it was going for 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Because we've got so much that's been bought up, the demand is still there and the availability is just, it's getting more and more scarce and people are willing to pay. So these a lot of the agriculture, if you want to call it that in Oconee County, where families own land, they lease it out, they're looking at now $10,000 to $12,000 an acre from these developers. And so the reason I'm saying this is it's needed, and I think it'll really help, but I think education has got to be at the forefront, because that's one really positive thing that I see Richard Carr being able to do, is because he has the ear of those families and those, and they trust them. And because there is sort of this feeling of the landowners that I know that know I'm involved in this, at first were kind of like distrustful from the outer town people trying to come in and, protect, which I don't think they're against, but they don't understand
I think it's a perception issue for sure, and the questions that were asked at this breakfast reflected some of that. But I thought it was really well presented, and to have the landowners who have already chosen to put their land in easements, and they were very frank about the pros and the cons and the reasons they did it.
Well,
was
keep
really
in mind,
helpful.
when these values have gone up, appraisals will go up and conservation appraisals will go up. It
Right.
all goes up. When they
Right.
have the comparables to back these sales, we need to we need to be aware we're gonna go through our money pretty, it's gonna go faster now because everything's gone up.
I think so too, and I hope that we have an uptick in our request for funding. So, grant status,
Been no changes in the grant status.
thank you. Now let's move on to our discussion items. I did want to mention that we had a board resignation. It's for an at-large spot. As of yesterday, we have not had anybody apply for those spots. So I would encourage, if I know several of you know someone who might be interested, to go ahead and apply.
Let me introduce a guest real fast.
Okay.
So this is a friend of mine, Jessica Fry. Jessica,
Hi.
hey, she is heavily involved in a lot of aspects of the southern part of Oconee County, kind of out in that area we're talking about. She has a nonprofit equine therapy center, Wild Hearts, which you might have heard of. She's also involved with the volunteer fire department. So she does a lot of stuff. But she and I, on a couple of occasions, have discussed that we have a position open at large, and she expressed an interest in maybe just seeing what our meetings are like and
Okay,
kind of what we're
great.
about.
Well, welcome.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. We do have to have 4 members to have a quorum, so it would be refreshing to have a full 7 board. It gives us a little more leeway to have a quorum. Our next item is the revisions to the Oconee County Conservation Bank Board webpage. Jennifer, can you pull that up? It was in... Okay, and again, I made notes on this. So the way it's stated now is that we provide a financial incentive to willing landowners to convey either a conservation easement or fee simple title to eligible recipients. And we do support fee simple transactions, but we also require them to have a conservation easement. And this is also on the grant, on the application, so we're gonna have to change it both places, on the funding application. So I think that we need to do a little bit of wordsmithing to make sure that people understand if we do grant a fee simple title, we are going to also require conservation easement. So, thoughts?
You could just throw on a comma where such transaction is supported by a conservation easement.
Okay, perfect.
You see why it's good to have attorneys?
I know, that's why I said,
I've been trying to tell you, man.
that's why I said wordsmith. Okay, where such transactions are supported.
By conservation easement.
And do you think that we don't need to make a motion for that, I mean, or do we?
I think it'd be best.
Okay,
Any
Is
other
supported,
language with
is
it?
supported the right word there?
I don't know if supported is, also includes a conservation easement. Does that work?
Yeah, that works too.
Do we want our other lawyer to pitch in on that?
Nah.
well, you did such a good job with the wording of redoing that.
I mean, I, Taylor's suggestion, I think it's
Okay.
fine.
I mean,
Okay. So is there a motion that we write this, add that little snippet, not only to our website, but also to the funding application.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Any other discussion or suggestions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Our next order of business is the South Carolina Land Trust Network. And this is a network, it's a nonprofit network of land trusts throughout the state, and we've been invited to join. It is one way that land trusts continue to gain insights, learn, and share best practices in the land conservation industry. So recently, a new membership category has come up, and it gives county-led organizations that fund conservation projects an opportunity to join. The county reps are not voting members. It's only for educational and networking purposes. Meetings are held in the spring and fall, and dues are $300. So even though we may not attend all the meetings, I think it's something worth looking into. There are other conservation boards that have joined the land trust, getting us out there, networking. And then my main reason for joining is that their annual retreat next year is going to be February 6th and 7th at Table Rock. So it's literally going to be in our backyard. And even though it's Pickens County, with us being their neighborhood county,
Does Pickens County have a,
they do not. But they are, well, they don't.
okay,
I think there might be 5 or 6 in the state that do, counties that do. They're probably more in the low country. Greenville just implemented
Greenville's-
one.
got a big one.
I want to say it was Newberry or Georgetown that asked the Land Trust Network if they could join. Thoughts, discussion?
I'll make the motion that we join.
A second.
Not just discussion item. So for the dues, is that something we can take out of our bank accounts? Or do we need to procure that money from somewhere else?
I'll
So,
say forever. We'll join, tab, will you?
yeah. So I don't know if you are aware that our county attorney has moved into private practice, David Root, and is now working for the county on a
Contract basis.
contract basis. So I've left a message with him and I have not heard back. So I don't think there's going to be any issue with either us joining or the funding, but I'm waiting for his final approval. I wanted to go ahead and throw it out there to y'all. And the reason why I don't think there's going to be an issue is that other counties have done it and we're not voting. We're not implementing any type of policy or any type of influence. It's purely networking, educational. How are these other counties doing it? How are they reaching landowners? So that's all pending.
Okay.
That's a very good question. Thank you. Any other discussion?
So do we want to, would the vote be to approve this, that we join pending David Root's okay?
Final okay, yes.
Okay. I think it's a
Knowing
good
that we
idea.
don't, I don't anticipate any issues with that.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, our money is dedicated for these grants, but I mean, we've spent money on, name tags.
Go ahead and say it in.
We've hit the big time.
Everyone has their name tag on but me. I've already worn my name tag to an event. Thank you very much.
Keep the plastic on it.
Yeah.
It'll look new longer.
Is there any other discussion?
For clarity, David Root's still gonna be an attorney for the county's questions and, he's,
My understanding is that he's on a contract basis until a full-time replacement is hired.
okay.
So he's in private practice now,
Yes.
working for a law firm, I think, in Greenville.
And Ryan, we do the same thing over in Georgia. We do
Right.
some city work on a contract basis. What that really means is instead of the city paying us a salary, we bill them by the hour.
Yeah, just whatever, just builds.
So our logistical direction here would be, you talk to David, we're authorizing you to talk to David
I
Rudy.
already have. I left him
Okay.
a message last
Okay.
week and waiting to get back from
Okay,
him.
so he gives you, he says, yeah, it's
Yes.
great, and then you actually do the joining,
Exactly.
okay? I mean, authorizing you to tell Jennifer, to write a check or however we're gonna spend the money.
Right.
Out of our account. I guess you could write the check out of the account, yeah. Okay, all right. Just to be clear on that, the logistics.
So, and this is simply, there's no timeliness of us joining. It's more just, I'd like to have it on the record, so when we do clarify with David and next meeting comes up, we're members.
So the motion would be, to amend it, it would be, to join if approved by David, and then to spend the money to do it.
Pending, yes, approval by our county attorney, that there are no conflicts at all.
Okay.
With us being part of the South Carolina Land Trust Network.
That's a great idea.
Okay, good. I think we have a motion on the floor. I think we have a second, and we've had discussion. All those in favor?
All right.
Thank you. And now Jennifer, will you call Chris, please? Chris Darker is the Land Trust connection with Upstate Forever, who was at our last meeting. He was not able to make today's meeting, but we're gonna connect with him online. I do want to point out two things. The signature page was added on page 13
Okay.
on the
fine.
most recent grant that Jennifer sent out. Also, on page 175, we've added the U.S. Forest Service map with landowner strategies. And you may remember Chris showing us that on the phone, on his phone, but that shows key parcels to protect or purchase. And this piece of property is on that. So those two things are now officially part of the grant request.
Okay.
So-
Chris? Can you hear everyone?
Yeah, I'm actually watching it on YouTube.
Okay, all right.
Hey, Chris. So,
What if he's getting an echo?
How do we look?
I'll first move into this discussion regarding the Fall Creek Headwaters application for funding by asking Taylor to just give us a snippet of thank you about our site visit to the property.
Yeah, so,
There is,
Turn the YouTube off and try to hear.
that's totally up to you. There is a little bit of a delay, but you may be able to not be quite so confused if you just mute the YouTube.
Okay.
And then once they start talking, if you can't hear them, let me know and I'll move the mic.
Okay.
See, Jessica, we're high-tech.
Yes. I love it.
A lot of moving parts. Okay, Taylor.
sure, on May 10th, myself and Ryan and Em met at the property to kind of walk around. And the lay of the land out there is this property kind of backs up to a ridge line and slowly descends down towards a creek bottomland area. My initial impressions of the land is that it's a nice parcel. There were some really interesting kind of ecological components to it. Things that stuck out to me were on the backside of the property, there were coves with drainage and seeps and things like that. And it made for somewhat unique little parts of the woods, at least based on what I'm used to seeing. Some notes I'd made, there appeared to be some mature stands of trees further back in those coves, which I think is significant. There was either an elm or an elder tree that I'd never heard of before. I thought that was neat. There was turkey feet or ground cedar on multiple areas of the property, which is an indication of a really healthy and thriving ecosystem. There's some interesting riparian habitats. So the property contains the headwaters to Fall Creek, which is a tributary to the Chattooga Wild and Scenic River, which is an outstanding resource water. And along those little headwater branches, some really interesting riparian habitats have developed. Minimal sedimentation in these little branches, which was, again, unusual, and I think that's just because it's kind of pocketed by this fork. Noticed multiple bird species, New York ferns, some Appalachian cane. We had the bird app out and listened to a black and white warbler, which I understand is a little bit less common.
Red-eyed vireo,
What's that?
the red-eyed vireo?
Red-eyed vireo as well. Mountain laurel was blooming out on the backside of the property. It was beautiful. The property shares boundaries with Forest Service land. Something about the landowners, April and Jody initially moved to the area some time ago and built kind of a cabin and lived there. And they have since added on to that initial parcel. Their plan is to get the headwaters of Fall Creek protected as far as they possibly can through conservation easements. Over the years, they've acquired more properties that are contiguous to their initial property. And they have plans to keep going on that grab if they can. So, those were kind of my impressions of the property. Really, really neat to walk around. We kind of walked down their driveway and then turn and walk back up the creek towards where their home site is. And I thought it was a really, really enjoyable afternoon and a neat piece of land.
May I ask a question? And Chris, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay.
Chris, if they acquire additional land, can it be added to the conservation easement?
Yes, it can.
Okay,
It's a good question.
thank you, sir.
And I was impressed with how the topography laid on this. I mean, it's very walkable. I mean, the portion we were on was very walkable. Now, it gets steep as you go up to the Forest Service, but the track goes all the way up to one of the prettier spots locally in the Forest Service where John Mountain Road dead ends kind of on a mountaintop, and they join that. So, I mean, I think the development risk would be rather high on this. I mean, I think it would be.
And I was surprised on the application, we'll get to that, that he ranked that low. 'Cause I
Yeah,
thought
I mean,
so.
from a real estate broker standpoint, I'm just saying that would be, what I saw was several home sites on that.
And that's kind of the point too. We could say Jody and April would never develop it, but that doesn't mean in the future that it wouldn't be.
Certainly.
Right.
Yeah, and I think they mentioned at one point, I think a previous landowner had considered damming up portions of the creek to create a lake and maybe a summer camp.
For a camp for girls.
Just to kind of speak to the development risk here,
That was that 70 acres that they
Yeah.
just most recently.
Interesting, it was before camps went co-ed.
Right.
And so it was gonna be kind of the female. Girls camp to Camp Chattooga, being the boys' camp. Back in the maybe 50s. I mean, I thought that was interesting. I never put all that
I think
together.
it's really interesting and a little bit fun to hear the history, the reason that the landowners purchased the land, their long-term plan for adding more parcels. It's what makes the site visit, it just adds that little bit of extra dimension to really understanding the decision that they're making to put their property into an easement and preserve it.
We walked up on an old home site that had this really cool forked oak tree with redemption fern growing on it. I thought that was kind of cool, kind of full circle.
it was neat. And just to speak about April and Jody, I mean, they seem to be all about protecting, the land. They started off living pretty primitively, and have since built a house and kind of gotten into creature comforts a little bit more, but, I mean, they were pretty adamant that they want to protect that piece of land.
Absolutely, and I've known Jody and April for years, you know, as river guides, and, you know, they live 20-plus years totally off the grid in their place, but, you know, these are raft guides and teachers that have used their money to scrape together this property with a really good, with an amazing intention to do this. You know, I think that should really be applauded, that they're so committed to doing this.
I would too.
So let's dive in to our individual Oconee County Conservation Bank criteria worksheet. And I've asked Ryan, who is our secretary, as we discuss these items and as we come to a conclusion as a group of the point value, to go ahead and record it.
Jennifer, do you have any extra of those in case she wants to see what
Let's see.
this is how we have to score all the properties we
Okay.
look at.
I don't have one in front of me.
I don't have one. The only copy I made was for you.
I can create one in this one.
I've got one that I've written on, if you just want to overlook my scribblings.
Don't you have to report, I mean, that's what we're
You
gonna do, is
have-
we're gonna report
Yes.
our
Here we go.
scores.
Maybe this one is empty.
I'm gonna
It's
need your score.
four-page.
Thank you,
That's good.
thank you.
Okay, perfect. Section, project property name, Fall Creek Headwaters, grant cycle, April 2024, applicant signature present and all required documents attached, yes. Landowner notarized signature present, items A and C on application checked yes, and if item D checked yes, documentation attached, yes. Moving on to section 3, land management evaluation. Land manager qualifications, pass. Moving on to section 4, conservation criteria. Environmental sensitivity, we're going to assign 0 to 4 points for all that apply. And let me throw this in as well. For a non-farming piece of property like this, it has to meet the minimum points of 40 for us to approve it and to move on to county council for their approval.
So in light of that, so timber does not qualify as agriculture?
It does.
I mean, you have mature, the value of the, I mean, just because there's not
I
tilled
think
soil.
the intent is there, though, you know, they're not, the timber's not there
Right.
as an agricultural intention.
Right.
My understanding of that is whether it's a working
Okay.
agriculture land.
Okay.
So it could be a timber farm. but-
Yeah.
But it's not, that's not their intent, but that is a good, I think there are 4 categories and each have different point values assigned to it. So 40 is what we're looking for here.
Okay.
Wetlands, and y'all just shout out, we're not gonna do.
Zero.
Wet-
0.
0. USGS, Blue Line Streams and Lake,
4.
4. Adjacent to water classified as either outstanding natural resource water, outstanding resource water, trout water.
So I know their application had NA, but I actually had some points here because I think Fall Creek is a tributary to the Chattooga River.
Yeah.
I think that's relevant here. So I gave that a 4.
I would too.
I gave it the 0 because that's what they put on there, and I'm not sure if the you know, those are actual, you know, kind of regulatory classifications. I'm not sure if the Chattooga there has any of those. It's National Wild and Scenic. I mean, I think we should have a little sub-4, III, or IV, that says, you know, National Wild and Scenic River, something like that, you know, but I went with 0 on
Would
that.
Fall Creek not qualify as a trout water?
I don't know if it is qualified as a trout water.
Chris, would you like to speak to that?
Is this a water source?
I don't think, Fall Creek is not classified as a trout water, it's just a freshwater.
So-
I don't think it has any capacity for trout at all.
And you were basing your 0, your NA on that, is that it's not regulatory classified as any of those 3 things, is that correct?
I would agree with that, yes. It is a tributary for an outstanding resource water, but it in itself is not.
Okay.
But the category is adjacent to water classified as either, and it is adjacent to an outstanding natural resource water.
It's not adjacent to the Chattooga.
So, okay.
It doesn't border the Chattooga.
So define adjacent.
not
directly
next to it, but.
Hey, it sounds like we got some wannabe
We got
lawyers.
2 lawyers.
I mean, I think there's some value
I
there.
think so,
It's
too.
the spring water of the.
I think so too. So I don't think this is a point that's going to really be, it's not gonna end up one way or the other. So can we call it a 2 or is that cheating?
Well, it's, yeah, I mean, you score, I mean, my offer is a 0, but you got 4s, you can average it, you can do whatever you want to do.
Thoughts?
I think it deserves points here, you know, those are my thoughts.
Something. I mean,
Thoughts? I beg your pardon?
I said, and I had a 0 with Andy.
Okay.
2 lawyers against 1.
Well, what about 3
Scotty and I count
non-lawyers?
for something.
I know.
Farmer and a
Am I allowed to
farmer.
ask a question without contributing to?
Yeah.
You need to introduce
Okay,
yourself. if
I
you
just
could.
have, I'm Jessica Fry.
Okay.
Is the Chattooga not trout water? Because we fish it.
Chris just said it was not classified as trout water.
That was just a.
That was a great question. Okay, so if, let's just give it a 0, because Chris had NA, we've got some 0s, and I would rather err on the side of being conservative with these numbers. If it ends up being a factor, we can always come back to it. Presence of threatened endangered species,
0.
At 0.
I had 0 as well. Presence of habitat suitable for threatened endangered species.
4.
I had a 4.
So I had a 4 as well, and the reason for that is the U.S. Forest map mentions reptile and amphibian conservation. And so there is the potential, because of the biodiversity of the land, that certainly,
It's very suitable.
No argument there.
so we're gonna give that a 4. Category F, presence of native wildlife species or habitat suited for native wildlife species.
4.
4.
I had a 4.
I was gonna say, I split that one
Okay,
and said 2 because I didn't think there was the wildlife species there, but they did have the habitat suitable for it. So
Let's see. You assign 2 points to each part of that.
I give
Yeah.
2 points to either side of that or.
But they do have native wildlife
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
species there.
Yeah,
And and it has habitat suitable for it.
yeah.
That's why I went.
Okay.
So-
I'm happy to do with the 4, go with the 4, but I'm just explaining what
right.
why I
Yeah.
thought I'd split it.
Extent of biodiversity,
Went with their score of 0.
Well, what did y'all think?
I think this one deserves points as well. I mean, you see a lot of stuff in Long Creek and Mountain Rest in terms of little habitats, but I saw some things that you just don't see very commonly. So I think it deserves some points.
I think one of the problems is biodiversity is not really defined. Chris, why did you say 0 on that, in the application?
What is I couldn't hear you guys very well. What
The
do we
extent of
got?
biodiversity, I think you put NA or 0. And we're all
I put
saying,
NA or 0? For diversity?
yeah.
For biodiversity.
I believe it has to do with the data that is available, and so it's sort of like we can answer the question of is there a cultural history to that property? We know the answer is yes, but we can't describe it because we haven't actually studied it. So if I consult the DNR data for this property, there's a lack of information that doesn't provide you with any real insights on diversity. That, to me, when I look at the CCAS report, which is it should be in that application, the Southeastern Conservation Blueprint report, there is there's good indication of the potential for reptile and amphibian habitat, or even migratory bird species, Acadian flycatchers. So there's this potential for it, but documentation is lacking. And I think that's why I don't think I can say very positively that there is a diversity there. But I mean, you guys have been there. You know there is some diversity. I don't know why I would have put a 0 there. I don't think have I scored this thing? I don't think I have I?
No, Chris.
You answered no.
Our criteria is not word for word your grant, but we're gleaning from your grant the criteria. And one of the questions
Okay.
that we're called to answer is the extent of biodiversity. And so,
I see.
and let me go back to Gordon. We were talking about the native wildlife species or habitat.
Yeah.
He does, on page 9, he does have that answered as yes.
Okay.
He's got does the wildlife contain native wildlife species or habitat suitable? Yes. Does the property currently contain habitat suitable for threatened or endangered species?
Okay. I see. You're looking at G, that the property contains special or concentrated biodiversity. And that question to me makes me think of, does this have persistent trillium, or does it have Oconee bells, and that to me is what comes to mind when I see the words special or concentrated biodiversity. The property has biodiversity, but special or concentrated, I do not think of on that property. I find it typical for that ecoregion, and I find it healthy and abundant. But special or concentrated are not words I would use to describe the biodiversity on that property. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. Our question.
And I feel like if the question is going for something else, then the wording is wrong.
So
But
our
I hope
criteria
I've
is.
clarified
the
my
ex-
perspective.
Okay, I think I've got it. Our question is worded a little more broadly. The extent of our biodiversity. Do we acknowledge that that there is biodiversity on the property?
Well, our question is about special or concentrated. We just shorthanded that on the scoring sheet to say extent of biodiversity. So,
Right, so on the scoring sheet, what I'm looking at is the extent of biodiversity.
true.
Does biodiversity exist? Or what are you looking at?
So I just wanted to make a reference to our ordinance, that's where the application came from is the criteria that's in the ordinance, and we took that to make our questions, so that's where they came from. And I still think that G on our criteria worksheet is just referencing that question. It's shorthand for saying special or concentrated biodiversity. And that's what Chris is saying, that it doesn't have evidence of that. It does have biodiversity, but it doesn't have what our question asks. And we're just reporting his answer
Okay.
to our question on here under the shorthand extent of biodiversity.
So the way we appear to be scoring this is like all or nothing. I mean, it's like,
And one might argue
On that question, yeah.
that any appearance of biodiversity is special.
yeah.
Because not everything has biodiversity.
You get mighty lawyerly.
You might not be a lawyer, but you can play
Since
one.
I'm married to one and I've got two others in the family.
It's not
necessarily a
good thing.
I know it's not.
There's validity to that. For example, you go to a timber tract and, it can support a healthy deer population, which has a great recreation component and a land management component. But that's a pretty intense monoculture that has a lack of diversity by comparison. I think, it is all about perspective. The property has, I would say, a healthy and a present biodiversity, just not special. What makes it special?
Okay,
I don't know.
so let's
Let me
To me, is a
interject one more.
qualitative word that is, I think, worthy of a definition.
Right.
So I don't know if this has like a score range of 1 to 4. I mean, maybe it deserves a point or two, but this is not an Oconee Bell Preserve. This isn't. We don't have rare or threatened species on this property that are being protected. It has habitat suitable for it, but I mean, you do have a question D: does the property currently contain threatened or endangered species? Which that would, if I did have Oconee bells, or if I had persistent trillium, I would have said yes, right? So I think that's there. I do feel like this question sort of begs some clarity. Is there a point range here?
Yes, 0 to
Yeah,
4.
0 to
Andy,
4.
one.
And so I want to interject. So I went to the ordinance and it just says extent of biodiversity.
Okay.
And, evidently when we made that question there, we intensified it by saying that. So I'm going to go with
Thoughts?
that and give it a 2.
I'm
Okay.
gonna say 2.
I'm saying too.
Gordon,
I'm comfortable with that.
okay. 2.
But I think in that view, that I do think this is it's an awkwardly worded question
Yeah.
to get to that, and that
But we
you
got
guys
there.
were present. I mean, we had scarlet tanagers, we had 2 vireos. One of them was pretty common, but the other one I don't see very often. A black and white warbler. That's not common. I rarely see those,
Okay,
or hear them rather. I mean, it is migratory bird season; they're passing through, but that to me says a lot. I'd say
Okay, good.
it's got a
Well,
pretty
we
good
scored that at 2,
biodiversity.
Chris, out of 0 to 4. So moving on to H, unique geologic natural feature.
I think you answered no on that on the application, but then listening to what Taylor was saying about those seeps, I mean, I would almost,
And Boulder Fields.
I'd give it I'd give it a 2 for that myself. I mean, that's
It's
sort of
not
the
the
benefit of
average.
having a site visit.
This is not the average property.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That'd be my vote. I mean, my input on unique or would be 2.
Okay. Thoughts?
But you're the boss.
I'm not the boss. This is a equal opportunity.
I like 2 for that
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
Moving on to question 2, under section 4. This is an objective question, percentage of property sharing boundary. So we're gonna give that a 2 because it falls under the category of 26 to 50% sharing with the Sumter National Forest. 25.7%.
It'd be 4 if it was totally surrounded.
And if it were totally surrounded, interestingly enough, it would fall under a different category for our grants because it would be considered an inland property.
What if it had a conservation easement on one side, 50%, and the Forest Service on the other, same thing?
If something falls 100%, like let's say I've got a house in Table Rock, that would be considered, for our purposes, and we're digressing, an inland property.
Yeah.
So, question 3, historic cultural features. And Chris said that there's nothing. I would argue that it is a location of a historical event because of the connection with the Chattooga River, which just celebrated 50 years of being designated a wild and scenic river. It's 1 point, it's not gonna make a difference, so I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Well, there's
I
also
think there is some historic value to it, but,
the Blackwell home site, that structure's still standing. Remember that really old cabin he showed us?
That's what popped into my mind.
but Chris didn't have any of that written on there,
Yeah.
so thoughts?
I'd go with
No.
site visit and say a couple of points at least.
Chris, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, in the application, it asks, listing for a National Historic Register are eligible, or contains historic or prehistoric structures, and these are all things that have to be documented. And so, if I was to say yes on all these, I have to actually provide documentation for these things. And so, with lack of documentation, I can't answer yes to these things. Now, you guys saw the Blackwell home site, which could potentially be eligible, perhaps. I don't know. It is literally, again, this sort of thing that unless the Department of Archives and History comes out and documents the site and gives it a rating, there is no documentation or consideration or eligibility. So, you fall into that conundrum of, you can see something that has historical value or some meaning, but unless you have documentation, and when you look at these questions, we just don't have that. This wasn't the site of an historic battle or
Right.
an historic school.
And you are
or
right, and
anything.
I'm actually
We
gonna
just don't have.
I'm gonna change my position because that property does not contain the location of a historic event. It feeds into.
You're talking about the Chattooga.
I think we all agree that a historic event is that being designated as a wild and scenic river. Is that on this property? Is the Chattooga River on this property? No.
It's not in the corridor.
It's not, it's not. So I'm gonna take back that, and I'm gonna give that, I'm gonna suggest no points.
Well, I would go with, in our ordinance and in the question, it contains historic, prehistoric structures. And I had to say it does contain a historic structure. They've seen it.
The Blackwell
Yeah.
site?
Now, I don't know if that Blackwell Homestead is in the easement area. I didn't think to ask that when we were out there, but it's right there. I mean, we're walking down the middle of the property, it's right there.
Chris, is it?
Chris,
You cut off.
is the
yeah.
Blackwell property that we saw on, is that on the easement?
The Blackwell house.
Yes.
I'm looking now to see if that. I have a feeling that it is just
She did say
outside the
146.
easement. I'm trying to confirm it. Yes, yeah. The house is actually outside the easement. The Blackwell
Okay.
house.
Okay, good.
All right.
So we're not gonna designate any points for category 3.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
4, prime Statewood soil types.
Their
Zero.
application had 0, I
Correct.
put 0.
5, actively farmed, future farmed,
0.
0. 6, public visibility of property.
1.
I gave, okay, did
Put
you
it in the
give
John
1
Mountain, you can get a good view.
I put
In
a
the
1
winter,
for
you can
that
see
as
the whole
well.
thing.
for A or for B?
For both, so 2
For
total.
each, okay. So I know it is definitely visible from public access lands or waterways. So visible from federal, state, county road.
So
John
John
Mountain
Mountain
Road.
Road would be a federal road, in my opinion. It's a Forest Service road. The property's visible from John Mountain Road. I think
Okay.
that deserves a 1.
John Mountain, it's interesting that he said no. John Mountain Road ends at the ridge line above the property inside the Sumter National Forest. The property is visible from this viewpoint. So is it visible from any public road, county road?
I think the standard is federal, state, or county. I think we got a federal road. I mean, that's,
Okay,
So it's visible from the National Forest and from the road.
okay.
that's right.
Yeah.
So we're gonna give A, is everyone?
Say 2.
So I wish that we could somehow put could we go, Jennifer, to the application, and I'm on page 11. And the way we are now is following. Okay, perfect. So this is, as of now, we're really following bit by bit the questionnaire with the application. So, scenic views.
I gave it a 2.
Scenic view from property,
So
and
on,
then
back up on 6, we gave it a 2.
Yes, sir.
we gave A 1 point and we gave B 1 point for a total of 2.
Okay, good. All right.
7, scenic views. Does the property provide one of the following? So the answer on the application, scenic view from the property, no. Maintain scenic nature of the county, yes.
So I think the workaround here is the maximum value. I think it does contain a scenic view, first of all. The application says no. Maximum total points here is 2, so we can just give the 2 to the preservation of scenic nature of the
Okay.
area. Because that was
Okay.
indicated affirmatively on the application.
So we're gonna give 0 for A, and then we're gonna give 2 for B.
That's
Is
right.
everyone in
That's the way I
agreement?
scored it, yeah.
Okay.
It's got one of the most scenic views up near John. I don't understand, I mean, I'm just saying, that's one of the prettiest views,
It was beautiful.
but
I think well, that's not here and there. Okay, 8, public access. There's no public access. That's a 0. Does everybody agree with that?
Yes, ma'am.
9, location. And if you all want to refer on your screens, A and B, proximity to public lands, the property is directly adjacent at Sumter National Forest. Proximity to municipality community, the property is approximately 14.2 miles away from the city of Walhalla.
I gave it a 2 for proximity to protected lands.
Okay?
I did the same thing.
thoughts on proximity to municipality community?
I think this,
Too far.
this category is capped at 2, so you can, that's how I read it at least.
Okay,
You know?
That's right.
okay. Is everyone in agreement with that?
I had scored at 1, but
You mean on the A?
on A, I just split the 2 between the two.
Okay,
Same
And since
difference.
so you ended up with the 2?
I ended up with a 1,
Okay,
and a 0 for proximity to community.
so is that because, even though it's adjacent to the Sumter National Forest, because of the percentage of,
Well, again, I split it between the two portions of the category and said 1 point for each one is how I did it.
You're capping each category, I mean, it's a total.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I
and that,
think that's probably the right way to do it.
I think it's the same difference. I mean, you're gonna get 2 either way.
Well, no, but he's
No,
saying
I
he
only get
only,
one.
he gave 1.
Okay.
So when it says maximum points 2,
I took that, you had to have both of those to get the maximum.
okay,
Interesting.
So in that same way of scoring,
I know.
Gordon, would you go back to 7 and say you could get a 1 for A and a 1 for B?
Let's go back to 7.
Scenic view from property and preservation, scenic nature of area.
I would, because look at 5.
I had initially scored both of those as a 0, but after our
Okay.
But I
conversation-
mean, but
Yes.
the same,
Same logic.
Logic, yeah.
Okay, so if you look at question 5, to your point, maximum point 6, A up to 3 points, B up to 3 points, which supports Gordon's logic of, but then if you look at number 6, maximum points 1, what would you score? Half of,
Yeah.
okay, front.
There's a little inconsistency on this.
No need to snicker over there.
Yeah, I mean, it is true.
That's a good point.
But it's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up, Gordon, because I totally see the logic in that.
This is like statutory construction.
You know,
absolutely.
Your Honor, Your Honor.
Well, if the lawyers can't figure
So
it
should I
out.
change 7 to 1 and 1?
But if you look at question 6,
I think it's spelled out at 5, up to 3 points per subpart, which tells me specific to 5, that's how it can be scored. Those indications are not contained in section 7
Okay.
or 8, so I think we can do it
Score it however we want.
Good point.
okay.
Man, that's some good lawyers.
I'm feeling it. Present.
Okay, so taking into consideration that we're gonna keep 7 at 2, and then we're going to keep 9 at 2, because we're gonna max out proximity to protected land at 2. Category 10, threat of development, 0 to 5 points.
And I think, so the applicant put a no for that, or a 0 for that, or whatever. And I think, you're looking at the situation where you could have, well, we're gonna put this up for sale unless this conservation transaction occurs. There's a real present threat of development.
Huge.
That's why you would say, why the applicant maybe, answered 0. No, there's not a threat of development. But we're looking at it from the perspective of, like Ryan said, being a realtor, knowing that this could be prime development land, maybe not under these owners, but in the future. And that's why you could have a 0 from the applicant, or a no
So,
from the applicant, but us saying, no, it actually, in the future, it's poised for development. I mean, not immediately.
And not an imminent threat, so
Right.
I gave that a 3, simply because there's not an imminent, there's not a,
Right.
somebody who
Makes
has a
sense.
plan. Chris, again, On question 10, on the application, what was the reasoning behind no threat of development?
Well, I think you're all on the right track there. From an applicant standpoint, this is a black and white question. It's yes or no. Is there a threat of development? And that area of Oconee, I wouldn't say is rapidly being developed like it is, say, down around Stump House Mountain when you've got the school district pushing right up in there. And it's a different scenario. On a scale of 1 to 5, however, yeah, there is a threat of development there. And, these landowners have multiple parcels, and they could opt to sell a portion of one. There's really nothing stopping them from subdividing those larger tracts into smaller tracts, and somebody could come along and do just that. So the potential, so threat or potential, those are sort of differently weighted words here. There is a potential for development there. It'd be a great place for somebody to come in and pick up 30 acres or so and put a house on it or two and have a nice little rural.
Right, but there is a difference between
getaway.
potential and
So-
threat, for sure.
I think it's an interpretative.
Right,
What do you think, Gordon?
I know.
I scored at 0.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time looking at the
I-
grant application where he's, checked the box no, and, with no other explanation.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
saying, I'm gonna,
And
give-
us
give him
convincing
points
him
for
that he's wrong.
Aren't we empowered to score this with our view? I mean, it's.
I think we are, but you went on a site visit, I did not.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the application
Yeah.
and saying, no further explanation, no, nothing, it's just a check the box, no.
Well, when I
And-
go, but
So-
by being a real estate broker, it's hard for me to leave that hat off when I'm on property and I'm like, man, this thing is.
But
You could
again,
divide
to
this
your
up
point,
and, I mean-
so I'll be
But
honest
is there a
with you.
threat that that's gonna happen? I don't think there's any threat that
Not
that's gonna
active,
happen.
not active, but the potential, I mean,
Well, but
threat
that's not the
versus-
question. We're
Yeah.
not being asked about the potential. And
Yeah.
I had it at a 0 until I went out there and then I changed it to a 3. But the answer is no. There's no threat. There's no threat. A threat to me is something that's imminent. A threat is not a potential.
Well, I would say a threat would be things like they're extending water and sewer up near there, and, this would be the next,
Yeah.
piece or 2 pieces away or something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think anything like that's going on here. This is a fairly remote piece of property, and even if it were developed, it would be developed as a remote piece of property. It's just,
I'm with you.
I agree.
I agree.
I hear you.
So I think we should give that a 0.
Yep.
I think that's the only proper response. 11, we're going to go back to an objective question.
Don't we love that?
Yes, we do.
they're easy. 3 points.
3 points, because it is 108.25 acres. Impact of offside water quality.
I gave it a 3.
I gave it a 3.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it contains the headwaters of Fall
That-
Creek.
Yeah,
which is-
exactly.
State
That's-
country, some of it.
plans for property. I guess the plans are for them to continue to preserve it, and so we're going to give them a 2?
That's what I thought.
Is that how you read that?
We didn't bring it up, but I was impressed with how many hemlocks he had treated
Yeah,
and brought back. That was pretty cool. It showed a lot of effort on his.
So is that how,
I'd go.
what does that mean, plans for property? That means,
So I took exactly the opposite view of
Okay.
that question. Okay, so the plans for the property is, they want to keep it the way it is. There's no threat or, there's no plan to do anything to this property other than preserve it the
Conserve
way it is. So from a standpoint of, does it need a conservation easement? It's like, that, that's just how I read the question.
It's
You
a
know,
big question.
this doesn't, you know, there aren't any plans that would cause us to say, this property needs a conservation easement to conserve it. The plans are that it's gonna be conserved anyway.
So if, look at question 3, Gordon, and see if that maybe impacts your perspective. I mean, I beg your pardon, 13. Because the plans are, what are the plans for the property? Plans, restoration plans, commitments for future public access. And they do have plans in the easement for how that will be accomplished.
Yeah, and I kind of read it the opposite of Gordon in the sense of, are they gonna, plans mean,
Actively.
are they gonna do anything to enhance the conservation value of it? And they obviously are.
To actively preserve,
I think that is a
And,
plan.
I know.
and it's sort of like,
And again, it's-
I know, it's hard.
rewarding that plan to improve
Right.
the conservation value of it. I think that's the
And
intent of the question.
If that's the intent of the question, then I agree with you. But again, when I first read it
Yeah.
and looked at it, I thought,
so
I read it the opposite.
I-
As the, how do you score the question? That's
If-
the only real issue here is,
Mm-hmm.
how do you score the question? Does, do plans to conserve it enhance your score, or do plans to conserve it decrease the score? Or do they need our funding? That's kind of where my head was at.
I understand. So if you read the question on question 13, does that change your perspective? Because it changes mine a little, because attach a narrative description of the intended plans for the property, including the specific requirements that will be in the conservation easement or deed and how they will be accomplished. So the question as it relates to question 13 is, what are your plans after the easement is on there? What are you going to do to keep this property? In other words, one of the examples is commitment for future public access. Is somebody going to add a trail, or are they going to siphon part of it up for a public park?
Yeah, so, I mean.
So to me, it's more like what their plans are for the future.
Okay, so read this, include plans such as restoration plans. I didn't see anything about restoration plans. Commitments for future public access. I didn't see
No,
anything
there won't
about-
be that.
No public access. Okay, stream buffers for the property not already addressed in this application. I didn't get anything there. So I mean, I looked at these kinds of suggestions and it's like, came up with a 0.
I see what you're saying.
I totally see what you're saying. So the attached draft conservation easement, Chris, can you summarize, are there active plans in place, such as restoration plans, or what are there active plans in place? Will there be active plans in place after the easement is put on it?
There could be, and the easement allows for that. And so to explain my perspective on this, the conservation easement is a roadmap of sorts for the management of the property. While there may not be specific plans, such as a timber management plan, in this case, specifically for timber management, it says no timber management, which to me, no plan is also a plan. So that would be one plan that is immediately in place with this conservation easement. It would allow for an ecological restoration, provided there was a plan in place. So these landowners who are currently treating hemlocks would continue to do so with an ecological restoration plan. So Rick, that plan, what that does is it requires landowners to follow best management practices rather than them doing something willy-nilly. In other words, we don't want landowners out there just doing something because they saw it on a TikTok video. We want them to follow the best management practices of their local forester or their local ecologist, to get a naturalist in there to help them do these things. And so the conservation easement sort of funnels all activities into very specific channels. And that, to me, is a very hardcore plan and one that cannot be deviated from, not by this landowner or any landowner in the future. This is permanent. This is perpetuity. And that, to me, that's the biggest plan you can have. This easement also restricts activities very intensely within the riparian buffer zone of 100 feet.
So
Now, I
Chris,
think
can I
of the
interrupt you for
entire
a minute?
conservation easement
Would
as a
I-
giant
Would I,
buffer zone, considering that certain structures and activities are limited to building areas.
Chris,
But it
can,
does specify very specifically 100-foot
May I
buffer.
interrupt you
those,
just for a
to me,
minute?
are
No.
and where is would we find in the application the particular plan that this property is not going to be timbered?
Well, that is in the conservation easement itself. So, for example, we
Okay,
put
well-
a conservation easement on a piece of property adjacent to the Chow County Park that would require very specifically a recreation management plan. It protects the property. They could leave it that way if they want and just let people walk on it. But in order to implement recreation
So when,
infrastructure,
Chris, where you say see the attached draft conservation easement and narrative, where would I find that?
It was
Is
in
it-
the big, it's
that
at page 79 out of 167 on that big packet we got a couple weeks ago. And it talks about, structures that can be put up, what they can and can't do, improvements. I mean, it kind of lays forth what they can and can't do under the conservation easement document.
Well, I think a plan, though, is, I would argue that there is a plan in place, even if that plan is not to do anything, not to timber, to do the hemlock restoration. And I think those things, from my understanding, he submitted a draft easement. Those, Chris, you're saying those things are going to be included in the exact easement?
yes.
It's a little squirrely.
Well, and I'll give an example from the past. On one application we had, I think it was the Whetstone Hill property. They had a plan to get funding to improve the fencing to keep the cows out of the water. They had specific ideas that they were gonna do that was gonna enhance the conservation values. And I guess I'm kind of following more with Gordon on this, is that there's nothing specifically articulated as a plan to enhance the conservation values. I mean, I do agree that having a plan to not timber it is, that potentially could be a plan.
Potentially, but it's not, we don't have, we've got a draft conservation easement. So,
I mean, that's above and beyond what a conservation easement requires.
right,
Conservation easements will allow you to timber it, will allow you to clear cut it. So if you've got a commitment not to do that,
it distinguishes that easement from any other easement. But again, we don't have the conservation easement. He can tell us what the plans are, but we don't have, we've got a draft conservation easement. We don't have it.
Well, you only have a draft conservation easement until it's signed and recorded.
Right. I'm saying in our packet, right.
Well, I think they're representing that that's what the conservation easement will be.
Is-
If
Yeah, yeah,
it's
exactly.
approved. I mean, that's the purpose for having it in the packet.
So I think I would give them a 1 with the articulation of the intent not to timber. That's a plan that is beyond what a conservation
Right.
easement requires.
I'm okay with that.
Thoughts? I am too, because I have that as a 2, and
Cool,
I'm
I'm
learning a
working.
lot, I'll just leave it at that.
Well, yeah, it's,
So what's our thought, what's our votes across the board? What do you say, Scotty?
Okay.
Tyler?
I'm good with a 1.
I have to go with a 1 as well.
One
I
for
went
me.
from 2 to 1.
1 for me, I can go with
I was
1.
thinking 2, but
Okay,
So that'd be like a 1.21.
Who's got, does anybody have a calculator? Well, let's
We'll
see.
do one.
We've got 2/3 of our board giving it a 1. We have 1/3 of our board giving it.
1.25?
Yeah, no, we're gonna give that a 1.
Be 1.33.
Okay,
Do
so
the math.
Ryan, do you wanna real quickly add that up?
We're at
or-
31.
Okay.
I've already done it twice.
So now we're gonna move on to the financial criteria. And Jennifer, would you mind going back?
Hey.
Oh, no, you're right, you're exactly right. Leave it where you are. Financial expertise and resource for enforcement. Do we all agree, pass?
Yes.
Upstate Forever
Absolutely.
is an accredited land trust with many acres in trust, not only across the state of South Carolina and the upstate, but also in Oconee County.
And I don't know if you saw this, but they actually included an opinion of audit of Upstate Forever in the application, and it looks like they're set for a long time.
The accreditation is something that I think was recently done within the last 3 to 5 years.
Perfect.
And that definitely adds value. Funding percent requested. So we are, the way I looked at that is 9%. And our policies state that we want our funding to be less than 10% of the conservation value. So we do fall under that, so I gave that a 3. Thoughts?
I said 3.
I said 3.
Okay.
Same.
Matching funds, maximum of 5 points. We've got the Upstate Land Conservation Fund giving $15,000. We've got the South Carolina Conservation Bank potentially giving $115,000. I gave that a 5.
Yeah, the landowners will donate.
And the landowners are
Yeah.
kicking in too, so I gave that a 5.
Okay.
Too.
I don't know what else we can.
Yeah.
It's like another
What more do you want?
Yeah, I mean,
Partnerships, I gave that a 3 because you've got 2 prominent banks contributing without us. Thoughts?
Same.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Cost per acre
I give it a 2.
and
Two.
the cost per acre is $323. Fair market value, $6,000. So we're at 5.4%. So everyone agrees on a 2.
By the way, it's higher than that.
I know.
I'm sorry.
Right.
So our other economic benefits, I thought that was such an interesting perspective. When you really look at the economic benefit of the Chattooga River, you've got employees, you've got visitors. The economic boost to the area exceeds $2.6 million. Translating these numbers to 2024 dollars is the equivalent of 4.6 million, and that only considers boaters, recreation tourists, et cetera, et cetera. So I gave that a 2.
I did too.
I think that's, you're not gonna get to that tourism, the wild and scenic river, without pure, clear water. And that's a huge part of this property.
What'd you think, Gordon?
I scored it a 0. Just because of, this isn't the Chattooga, and it's a very minor part of the quality of the Chattooga. And I didn't see economic benefits to this easement. You're looking at it in a much broader context than what I looked at it. So when I looked at it in terms of this easement, I said, economically, there's no, again, this falls in with the plans, but there's no plan that this is going to develop into anything. This isn't going to create, a hiking trail or, a mountain park of some kind. It's going to just sit.
For now, but without an easement, you've got the potential of it not sitting. That's how I think of it.
I mean, what if
If-
it, worst
if it
case scenario,
were-
it degraded into a lot of sedimentation, taking down the, diminishing
Yeah.
to some extent the quality of the Chattooga River's, water quality?
And again, I looked at it in terms of the economic benefits. What? That might enhance values in that area
With the easement.
with the easement.
So you're looking at direct economic
That's what I
benefit,
said.
not
You're looking at it
indirect.
in a much broader context than what I looked at it when I read the question and scored it. But
I'm looking at it in the context of, without the easement, what could be economic, as it stands now currently, the economic benefits to the Chattooga River, if there were going to be some sediment damage, would it have an economic value?
And I live very close to where this property is. From what I see, people come to recreate in Long Creek or Mountain Rest. There's obviously the Chattooga River, but maybe even more so than that, it's kind of the rugged, you feel like you can get alone. And when you start putting, let's just say this whole property's turned into a golf course or something like that, a piece of, what people are coming out to Long Creek to find, it starts to get diminished. So that's what I see as the economic impact here.
It's the overall part of the puzzle.
Right,
So-
right.
So your economic impact is that because of the conservation easement, people won't be able to come and do all those things that would have an economic impact on the area. Again, it's,
It's a perspective, and it's not even it's an economic benefit. So the benefit that's there now is there, clearly. This easement is going to protect that economic benefit. That's how I look at it.
describe other ways that the project could provide economic
Economic
benefits.
benefits to Oconee County.
And I
By,
didn't come up with it. That's all I'm saying.
well, I see it as protecting the benefits that are there. Other than, describe other ways the project could provide economic benefits. It's the easement is not so much about necessarily, maybe we need to change that, not necessarily providing, but it's really more about protecting what's there. That's how I see it. But I understand that you're gonna provide economic benefits by protecting what we have.
It's, it's not in the ordinance about economic benefits that I see. So there's no real guidance there.
I think it's just subjective then.
It is
You know,
totally
if we wanna
subjective.
split the baby or however we
Yeah.
wanna handle it. I don't think it's ultimately gonna matter.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I like Gordon's perspective in that maybe, I mean, there could be a scenario, I can't think of one right now, where it's like, oh, yeah, it's actually generating revenue.
Well,
And that would
the height
obviously be a
control- yeah.
2, and this is not generating, I mean, so if we give this a 2, it's like,
I understand that.
other guys, like, getting cheated in the sense of somebody who actually was generating revenue. Like Camp Chattooga would be an example. If there was conservation easement there and it was fine for them at the camp, it is an economic generator. It's bringing in revenue
Like Crawford Mills is
directly.
gonna have like a visitor center there
Right.
with like tours.
So I'd go from a 2 to a
Okay.
1 on myself for that at least.
I'm gonna go from a 2 to a 1 as well. Because we're protecting what's there, but it's not. Thoughts?
I think that's good.
Okay. That's excellent perspective.
It is, absolutely. How'd we do, Ron?
That was 14. So,
So we're at 54.
44.
Oh,
yep.
hello. My mind's fried.
And I only came up with 30 on the front, on the first section.
So what, will you,
I
yeah,
did the
look at
first
the
part,
numbers.
then look up back over.
Do we need to make a motion to recommend this to the council?
So, first, let's,
I got 31 as well.
what's the, he's gonna compare.
We're adding them up.
Yeah, I'm just getting them to double check, Mom.
So the difference is number 6. You've got 1 point on A and 1 point on B, but it's a maximum of 1 point for item number 6.
That's a problem. That's an artful drafting of the application.
Yes.
So I ended up with, again, 30 points, but
I think you're right.
All right, so I'm gonna take one of those off.
So, are we gonna take it off of A?
I
Or
had
B.
1 point on A and 0 on B, but it doesn't matter.
Okay, I don't know, I can't remember, honest to gosh. I think I had the opposite, I had,
Yeah. Visible from public land is clearer than the.
okay. So we're gonna
See.
do 0 from A, and we're gonna do, so that's gonna take us to 30.
30, and then 14, 44.
44.
So, and Ryan, I know I asked you to do this, but I can do this, unless you just wanna sit there and do it. It's not, I mean, all we're doing is just transferring the information. So, with a score of 44,
3. Right, 44?
44. It's 44.
I've got
30
30,
plus 14.
30 plus.
and then I've got 14.
Okay.
What do you have? You want a pencil?
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I got 14 as well.
So,
That's 44.
okay, that's why I have a
I'm right there
pencil,
with
not
you.
a pen.
Right there with you. Catching up.
So with a score of 44, this does meet the criteria to present it to county council, and it does support funding. I did want to say one thing, and that is, in our findings that we send to the Oconee County Council, one of the questions is the availability of funds in the Oconee County Conservation Bank Fund for the award. And I wrote down our current balance is
381 and change.
383, 160.
383, 169. So
116.
383, 116. So this grant reflects less than 10% of our
Less than 5, isn't it? No, 35,000. You're right.
35,000. That was just quick math.
Yep.
So I think that we fall well into all of the numbers that are requested and that are required. So is there a motion on the floor that we present the recommendation from our board to fund $35,000 to the easement for the Fall Creek Headwaters property?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And so I move that we, and see if we need a motion, I'll make it so we can discuss whether or not we need it, that we also present the evaluation score sheet, which records all of our information, and the form you were just referencing, that we authorize you to
Okay.
present both of those as well.
So
I mean, that's how you're gonna make your recommendation.
that is. And so it's my understanding that the criteria worksheet is not to be presented to county council.
But the evaluation
Okay,
score
right.
sheet,
And not that this is secretive because it's right there,
right,
but this is not part of the,
that's right,
okay,
It's just our worksheet
Okay.
that's right.
for this board.
thank you.
There you
Oh,
go.
awesome. So we've got this, and I'll get with Jennifer to see if we can make it a clean copy. And then, Andy, would you also like to add in that motion?
Right, yeah, and a third thing, we have a form, which is a letter of support form, that we've already created it. It's a template, you just plug in the names. If the applicant came to us and said, can we get a letter of support to add to our application to the Upstate Land Conservation Fund or to our application to the South Carolina Conservation Bank? And that's what I'm moving, is that we authorize, yes, we will give a letter of support if asked.
And this letter of support will only be sent when the Oconee County Council, when and if the Oconee County Council approves our recommendation.
Correct.
Does anyone want to look at the letter?
And it's on our website.
It's on the website. It's
And
just a
It's
basic
just pre-approval
factual.
so that it can be timely enough for their applications. We don't have to come back to a meeting or wait for a meeting to approve it. Yeah.
It's just entitled a letter of support. So will you reinstate your motion, please?
So my motion is that we submit I move that we submit the evaluation score sheet and the 403 form to county council and authorize Emlyn to issue a letter of support if requested, if everything's approved by county council.
Is there a second?
I'll second that, yeah.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I have come up with a draft of section 2-404. There's nothing on here that's not in anything that we have talked about, written, or is in the grant request. But if anybody would like to see what I'm going to submit to county council, I would be more than happy. You want to just pass that down? And if you've got any changes, but it's all basically just copycatted from the grant.
and Emily's ahead of the game, so usually it's, somebody doesn't have that already done. And so what we're essentially authorizing her to do is like, boom, we went through our process, approved everything. Now, Emily, fill that form out. We're authorizing her to do that. She's just a step ahead of that.
And the
Happened
reason
already.
is because county council's meeting a week from, no, they're not meeting tonight.
Oh, they are, okay.
I must not have your right email, Ryan, because you must not be getting, we'll talk about it afterwards. They're not meeting tonight, they're meeting a week from, Tuesday. And it may not be time to get on their agenda, but
Usually my cutoff is today at lunch,
Well, okay then.
that agenda and sending it for approval.
Can we get in?
Is this all you need me to send to them? Because you will probably need to fill out an AIS, which is,
Before noon?
yeah, I mean, at least by 2 or 3 o'clock. So
what's an AIS?
It's an agenda item summary, so you're asking, you'll need a title that I put on the agenda, and then you're kind of summarizing underneath it, hey, this is what we've been asked for, this is our application, this is what we recommend that council approves, the $35,000 funding. That's what I put on for everyone to see, and then whatever you want in backup, if you want the application in backup, if you want all of our forms in backup, so everyone can.
So you're going to be submitting the backup to the county council today as well?
I don't, I can wait on backup because I can update it at any time. But I like to, I have 2 council members that pick up things in person. So Friday is when I get those out.
And when is the next county council meeting after?
June 18th,
June 18th?
yes, because we have early voting in here for 2 weeks, so we do not have a meeting the 1st of June.
I think we should aspire to try to do it
Okay.
today.
So my only concern is I really do not want to submit a handwritten, what's it, Gordon's hand?
Right.
Findings, section 2-4.
I think that needs to be, what do y'all think?
I think you're correct on that.
This council may do better with handwritten.
Well, maybe, you know,
I can say that. I mean,
Well, then the question is, do you
I'm
have
not
time to type it
I'm
up?
not the right person to, because I don't think I can do that on my iPad.
I got you.
I was hoping that Jennifer could do it, but that doesn't seem like it's a very, I mean, we could submit, unless somebody's got a secretary, which I am not that.
Is that, would you want that typed verbatim, like I don't need to make any corrections?
No corrections at all.
You want it verbatim as you have it written down? Okay. Give that to me, I'll type it up, send it to you for approval.
Okay,
And then you send me, I'll send you an AIS form,
okay,
which is usually typed up. But if you wanna handwrite whatever you want in there, or email me whatever you want in there, and I can do a draft of it and get approval.
okay, now this, I don't have a problem with this being, what do y'all think about this being handwritten? Or do you want her to type that up too?
I think it's fine.
Okay. I mean, I think the main thing is let's just get it before council.
I mean,
Okay. Second set of eyes, will you take that and just pass it down and just take a look at what I've handwritten to double check? And email me the AIS, and I'll just briefly as possible do that. I'll give you this. I did want to include
No.
the map that is on page,
No.
what page is that? It was the map,
That he sent separately?
Yep.
yes, and I can actually email that to you separately as well if you don't have it.
I think it's in backup, right?
It is in backup.
Yes, I have it then.
So thoughts, I thought if we included that US forest map, it's a pretty big piece of the puzzle, that this is land that is prime to be preserved and protected, and that's based on a recommendation from the US Forest Service.
You don't want the full application?
I don't. What do y'all, I mean, do you normally do? I think that's just getting in the weeds. I really do. And I think between this,
Keep it short and sweet.
the evaluation score sheet, well, what do y'all think about the map? Do you want to include that or no? Or do you
I
want?
like it because it's shorthand for also showing them where it is.
Okay. So will y'all just take a quick look at that and just double check? Any other discussion? And let me get back to my agenda. Any other meeting? We're not meeting again till August 13th.
Did we take our name tags with us?
Yes, because if you go to a Chattooga Conservancy meeting
That's the
or,
whole point of the
you
name
know.
tag, isn't
I'll
it?
put it on.
I've got a name placard out there somewhere.
Anything else? Does that look okay?
Yeah,
Everybody
this looks
agree with
good.
that? Okay. So, is there a motion that we adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll
Any,
second it.
any discussion? And I thank y'all for the participation, the input. We all have different perspectives, and I think it's fascinating, and I think that's why we're here. We all come from different, I don't want to use the word agenda, different perspectives, so thank y'all, and the meeting's adjourned.